They told me I'd never make it. They sold my house, lied to me, and pushed me aside. But when my brother left to find himself, I did the unthinkable. I bought the company he worked for, and now I'm ready to tear apart everything he's built. The truth? It's worse than I ever imagined, and I'll stop at nothing to get it back. But will my fight be worth it? Or will my own family tear me down first? I had always been the one to keep things together in our family, the peacemaker, the emotional backbone. I suppose it started when I was a kid, always the one to sweep up the mess, to calm the tempers. My older brother, Jared, had always been the rebel, and my parents, well, they were busy with their lives, leaving me to patch up the holes. I didn't mind, or at least I didn't think I did. The family home was everything to me. It was the foundation I stood on, a place filled with memories of birthdays, holidays, and quiet moments. It had been a refuge, a symbol of stability, but lately it had started to feel like more of a prison than a sanctuary. I was in my early 40s now, but the role I had played in the family seemed to have never changed. I was still the one who took on everyone's burdens. Everyone else seemed to move on with their lives, while I stayed, a constant fixture. I often wondered if they even noticed me anymore. Or was I just the one who kept things from falling apart? As I sat in the living room of our suburban home in Chicago, I could feel the weight of the silence around me. The house was quiet today, too quiet. It was early afternoon, the sun streaming through the window, casting long shadows on the floor. I leaned back, my eyes landing on the family photos lining the wall. There I was, younger, surrounded by my parents and Jared. Everything seemed simpler then. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the memories wash over me. The laughter, the holiday dinners, the arguments we had as a family. I had spent so many years making sure those moments stayed intact, that we stayed intact. But as the years went on, it started to feel like no one cared about my sacrifices. I was always there, but never really seen. That's when it hit me. I had given up so much of myself for the family, but in return, I had lost my sense of who I was. I had allowed myself to become invisible, defined only by the role I played. And for what? To keep the peace? To avoid confrontation? It was starting to feel like I was being used, like my emotions didn't matter as much as everyone else's, but something inside me had begun to change. I wasn't sure when it started, but over the past few months, the frustration had been building. Maybe it was because I had reached a point in my life where I could no longer ignore the weight of everything I had done. Or maybe it was because, for the first time, I started to wonder if I was more than just the family caretaker. I had dreams, desires, needs that were my own. I just had never given them the space to exist. I didn't know it yet, but that feeling was about to become the catalyst for everything that was about to unfold. I never saw it coming. The phone rang late one evening, the sharp sound slicing through the calm of the house. I looked at the caller ID. It was Jared. I hadn't heard from him in days. I picked up, trying to mask the irritation that had been simmering inside me. "Hey, what's up?" I asked, trying to sound casual. There was a pause on the other end, a hesitation. Then he spoke, his voice oddly flat. "I sold the house," he said, as if it was the most casual thing in the world. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words didn't make sense. My mind raced to make sense of what he had just said. I blinked a few times, trying to process. "You sold the house?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Yeah, it's done. The deal went through. It was time." I felt my chest tighten, my heart pounding in my ears. My family home, the place where we had all grown up, where so many of my memories were tied, was gone. Without a single word of warning, no discussion, no consultation. I hadn't been asked. I felt as if the ground beneath me was crumbling, and I could do nothing to stop it. "But, Jared, why? Why didn't you talk to me about this?" I asked, my voice shaking now, though I tried to stay calm. "I just thought it was the best thing," he replied. His tone was dismissive, as if the matter was already settled, and I had no place in the conversation. I hung up the phone without saying goodbye. My mind raced. I felt betrayed. For all the years I had put my family's needs ahead of my own, for all the times I had sacrificed my own happiness, this was the thanks I got. I walked around the house in a daze, the walls closing in around me. The house that had once felt like a home now felt foreign, as if it no longer belonged to me. How could he do this? How could he make such a huge decision without even considering how I would feel? I had always been the one who held everything together, and now this. As I walked from room to room, memories of our family's past flooded my mind. It wasn't just a house, it was the place where we had shared our lives, our love, and our pain. Now it was gone, sold off as if it didn't matter. And with it, my place in the family seemed to vanish too. The foundation I had built my entire identity on was crumbling, and I was left standing there, unsure of who I was anymore. I wasn't just angry, I was heartbroken. I had spent my entire life taking care of everyone else, and now, in my moment of need, there was no one to turn to. No one even thought to ask me how I felt about this. It was as if my emotions didn't even register. This was more than just a betrayal about a house. It was about everything I had given up for them, for this family. And now, I realized, I was the one who had to take control. I had been invisible for too long, and it was time for that to change. The morning was quiet, the kind of stillness that felt almost surreal after the storm I had just weathered. I sat in the small kitchen of my newly rented apartment in downtown Chicago, sipping coffee that had long since gone cold. The apartment was nothing like the family home I'd grown up in, but it was mine now. The walls were bare, the furniture sparse, and the air felt emptier than I had imagined. Still, it was a new beginning, one I wasn't sure I was ready for, but one I knew I had to face. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Jared's betrayal still echoed in my mind, like a ringing bell that wouldn't stop. Selling the house without even consulting me, our family home, the one place that had held my life together. I tried to wrap my mind around the decision I had made. Buying the company he worked for felt like the right move, but everything was so uncertain. It was a leap into the unknown, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of fear alongside the excitement. And I had spent years being the caretaker, the one everyone relied on. It was how I had defined myself. But now, the foundation that had been built on those years felt fragile. No one had asked me about the house. No one had asked me what I wanted, what I needed. That was the turning point. If I didn't take control now, I would always be the one picking up the pieces for others. With a heavy sigh, I set my mug down on the table, my eyes staring at the stack of papers in front of me. The deal wasn't done yet, but it was close. The financial advisor I'd hired was expecting me at noon to discuss the finer details. It was all starting to feel real, too real. My phone buzzed on the table, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a reminder for my meeting later, but it might as well have been a sign. I stood up and paced the room, trying to calm the nerves that were starting to bubble up in my stomach. I had spent so many years working for everyone else. Now, I had a chance to do something for me, something that could change my life. But with every step forward, a little voice inside me kept asking, "Are you sure about this?" It was all too easy to get caught up in the excitement of doing something new, something bold. But was it the right thing? Was I really ready for what came next? Just as I was about to sit back down, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call. I glanced at the screen. Jared. I hesitated for a moment before picking up. "Hello?" I answered, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could already feel the tension in my chest. "Sonia?" Jared's voice came through, smooth as always, but there was an edge to it that made my skin crawl. "I think we need to talk." I didn't need to hear more. I knew what this was. He wanted to fix things. He always did when things went wrong. But I wasn't sure I could handle his manipulation anymore. "I don't know if there's much to talk about," I replied, my voice steady, despite the hurt that still lingered. "You sold the house. You didn't even ask me." "I did it because I thought it was the best thing for the family," he said, his tone defensive, almost rehearsed. "We've been sitting on that house for years. It's time to move forward. I did what had to be done." "Did what had to be done?" I repeated, my voice rising now, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "You didn't ask me, Jared. You didn't even think about what this house meant to me, what it meant to us." "I'm trying to make it right, Sonia. I've made mistakes. Let's talk about it. I want to fix this." I was done listening. "No, Jared. You don't get to fix this. You don't get to play the hero now. You sold the house without even telling me. I'm not just going to forgive you because you regret it now." There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in his head. "I can help you with the company. I can offer you a deal to buy it back. We can fix everything, Sonia. We can make things right again." The offer hit me like a cold punch to the gut. He was offering me the chance to buy the company back, the very company I was planning to buy for myself. I should have felt relieved, but instead, it made me feel sick. The idea of forgiving him, of going back to the way things were, seemed impossible. This wasn't just about the house, it was about my whole life, the years I had spent being overlooked, ignored, and taken for granted. I could feel my hands trembling as I gripped the phone, my thoughts a whirlwind. Jared's offer felt like a trap. He was trying to regain control, trying to undo the damage he'd done. But at what cost? My independence, my dignity. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice low. "But don't expect me to just forgive you, Jared. Not this time." I ended the call before he could say another word. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from a rush of something else, something that felt a lot like empowerment. I had made my decision. No matter how hard Jared tried to fix things, this was my life now. I was no longer just the family caretaker. I was going to take control. I had to. The phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Jared. It was my financial advisor. My heart pounded in my chest as I dialed his number. The first day in my new office felt like stepping into a storm. It was surreal walking through the hallways of the company I now owned. The cold, sterile environment contrasted with the warmth of the family home I'd once known, and yet, in some twisted way, it felt like a homecoming. I was no longer just Sonia, the peacemaker in the family. I was Sonia, the boss. And with that title came a weight I hadn't expected. My office was modest, tucked away in a corner of the building. A sleek desk, a few chairs, and a large window that gave me a view of the busy streets below. It should have felt empowering, but instead, I felt like an imposter. The moment I sat behind that desk, the weight of my decision hit me harder than I expected. I had expected to feel a sense of freedom, a rush of excitement for taking control of my life, but instead, all I could feel was a knot in my stomach. Jared's voice still echoed in my head, the anger in his tone, the disappointment in his eyes when I told him I was buying the company. He had tried to guilt-trip me, to make me feel like I was abandoning the family. But I was done with that. I had made my choice, and now I had to live with it. As I sat there, the quiet hum of the office almost suffocating in its stillness, the first employees started trickling in. Most of them were polite, nodding in my direction as they passed by. But I could see the skepticism in their eyes. I could feel the judgment. Silent, but palpable. I had barely finished reading through the emails from the previous day when my door opened. A woman in her late 40s walked in, her expression neutral, but her eyes sharp. She was the head of marketing, someone I knew from the company's history. I hadn't worked directly with her before, but I'd heard her name often. "Good morning," she said, her voice brisk. "I'm Linda." I wanted to introduce myself. I smiled and nodded, trying to exude confidence. "Nice to meet you, Linda. Please, come in." She stepped inside, shutting the door behind her. "I've worked here for over 20 years, she continued, eyeing the space as if it were an unfamiliar terrain. "And I've seen quite a few changes. But I've got to be honest, I'm not sure what to make of the fact that you're here now." I blinked, taken aback by the bluntness of her words. "I'm sure you've heard," she added, leaning slightly against the doorframe. "There's been some concerns from the higher-ups about your leadership, your experience. You're not exactly who we expected, you know?" My heart clenched, and I could feel my palms beginning to sweat. "I understand," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm new to this, but I'm here to learn. I'm willing to work with all of you to make this company succeed." She gave me a long look, her eyes searching mine. "We'll see," she said, before turning on her heel and leaving. The door closed behind her, and for a moment, I just sat there. The weight of her words lingered in the air. I wasn't sure if she was just being blunt or if she was genuinely trying to test me. But it didn't matter. The challenge had been set, and now I had no choice but to face it. As the day wore on, the tension in the office grew. I found myself battling more than just internal doubts. I was fighting against the skepticism of the people I now had to lead. Jared's former colleagues didn't see me as the boss they wanted. They saw me as an outsider, someone who didn't belong. Then came Kevin. Kevin was the CFO, and as I walked into the boardroom for my first meeting with the senior staff, I could already sense his distrust. I had heard whispers about him, the way he always seemed to think he was above everyone else. "Good morning, Sonia," he said, his voice smooth, but there was something about the way he looked at me, cold, calculating. I returned the greeting and sat down, trying to steady my nerves. The meeting started off with the usual business talk, but it didn't take long for Kevin to throw a wrench into things. "As we look at the company's financials," he began, sliding a report across the table, "there are a few discrepancies I'd like to address." I looked at the report. It didn't take me long to see the issue. There was a massive error in the way the numbers were presented, an error that seemed to favor Kevin's department. "Kevin," I said, my voice firm, "this doesn't add up. I'll need a full breakdown of these numbers." Kevin smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Of course, Sonia. But I think you'll find that the company's financials are in order. Perhaps you're not as familiar with the reports as you think." The insinuation was clear. He was trying to undermine me. I felt my blood boil, but I kept my composure. "I think we'll need to revisit these numbers, Kevin. I'm not going to let this slide." His expression shifted for just a second, but he quickly regained his cool. "Well, if you say so, we'll have to see what the audit turns up." I knew what he was doing. He was testing me, seeing how far he could push. But I wasn't going to let him. I wouldn't let anyone push me around. Not anymore. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur, my mind racing. I couldn't let Kevin get away with this. Not after everything I had worked for. After the meeting, I sat in my office, stewing in frustration. I was more determined than ever. Kevin had just made it personal, and I wasn't going to back down. But then, as if the universe was giving me a cruel twist of fate, my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. Jared. I hesitated before answering. "Sonia," he said, his voice softer than it had been before. "I've been thinking about everything. I'm sorry for the way I handled things. I should have talked to you first. I know I hurt you." My mind raced, the words almost too much to process. But before I could respond, he kept talking. "I think we can still work something out, though. I've got an idea, something that could fix everything." I felt the weight of his words, the heavy pull of everything I'd ever known. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't going to give in, not now, not ever again. "I'll think about it," I said, hanging up the phone with more finality than I felt. But as I sat there in my office, staring at the city outside, I knew something bigger was coming. And I was ready for it. The morning after receiving the anonymous email, I felt a knot in my stomach. The idea of corruption within the company I had just bought was almost too much to bear, but I knew I had to face it. I couldn't afford to back down now, not after everything I had been through. I wasn't just fighting for my future anymore. I was fighting to uncover the truth. The stakes were higher than ever. My office felt colder than usual, the silence of the morning hanging heavy around me. I had spent weeks settling into this new role, dealing with the internal politics and external pressures. But this was different. The thought that my brother, Jared, might have known about the corruption when he sold the company weighed on my mind as I sat there, staring at the computer screen. I spent the morning going over financial reports, diving into spreadsheets that seemed to make less sense the more I examined them. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My mind kept going back to the anonymous tip. They had mentioned discrepancies in the company's financials, and now, as I scanned the numbers, I could see them. There it was, buried in the details, large sums of money misappropriated, transactions that didn't add up. The handwriting of corporate corruption was clear, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. I clicked through the pages faster now, my fingers moving more frantically. Each click uncovered more inconsistencies, The first feeling that washed over me was anger. How could they do this? How could Jared have been a part of this? But then, there was another emotion that followed quickly. Betrayal. The same feeling I had when he sold the family home, when he didn't even have the decency to consult me. It hit me like a freight train. The betrayal wasn't just from him, though. It was from the people around me, from the system I had trusted. This company, my new company, wasn't the fresh start I had hoped for. It was tainted, built on lies. The door to my office opened, breaking my train of thought. Sarah, one of the senior employees, stepped in. I hadn't known her for long, but something about her had always seemed reliable. She'd been working here for years and had a reputation for being one of the few employees who still genuinely cared about the company. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice soft, but there was an edge of concern in her eyes. I didn't have the energy to hide what I was feeling anymore. No, it's not. I've found discrepancies in the financials. Big ones." Her eyes widened slightly, and she walked over to the desk, looking down at the screen. "I was afraid of this." "Afraid?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've known about some of this," she admitted, her tone low. "There's been talk, but no one's ever done anything about it. It's been going on for years. It's been swept under the rug. And now, with you in charge, it's not going to stop unless someone stands up to it." I felt a chill run through me. The truth was out there, but it wasn't just about business anymore. This was personal. The more I dug, the more I realized that Jared was more involved in this than I had ever known. My brother, my own flesh and blood, had helped build this empire on corruption. The weight of it hit me hard, but I wasn't going to back down now. As Sarah and I continued to discuss the next steps, the office door opened again, and a man I didn't recognize stepped in. He was older, his face weathered, and his eyes cautious, like he was afraid of saying too much. He closed the door behind him and looked at me nervously. "Are you Sonia?" he asked, his voice shaky. I nodded, confused. "Yes, who are you?" I'm not supposed to be here, but I've got something you need to see." I exchanged a glance with Sarah before I stood up and motioned for him to speak. "I'm a former employee," he said, his voice lower now. "I don't know who you can trust in this company, but there are things happening here that you don't know about. I can't show myself, but I can give you the proof." He pulled a small USB drive from his pocket, holding it out to me with trembling hands. "What's on this?" I asked, my heart racing. "Evidence," he said simply, "of the corruption. It's bigger than you think. Top executives, your brother's former colleagues, they've been siphoning money for years. And if you don't act fast, it'll all come crashing down." The weight of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Why didn't you come forward before?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I've been trying to, but no one listens. The people at the top, they don't want this coming out. I'm not safe here. I'm leaving town, but I had to give this to you." I took the USB drive, my mind spinning. The risk he was taking, the information he was giving me, it could destroy everything. "Why trust me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside. He looked at me, his eyes desperate. "Because you're the only one who can stop this. You're the only one who's in a position to take them down." I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle over me. The game had changed. It wasn't just about running the company anymore. It was about exposing the truth. Before I could say anything else, he turned and left, disappearing as quickly as he came. Sarah stood beside me, her face a mix of worry and determination. "You know what you have to do, right?" I nodded, my mind already working through the next steps. "I have to confront Kevin. I can't let this go on any longer." The tension in the room thickened, and as I sat down at my desk, I felt a resolve settle over me. I wasn't just going to be a bystander anymore. I was going to take control, uncover the truth, and take down anyone who stood in the way of it. I took a deep breath, the air heavy with the realization that I was in this for the long haul. This battle was just beginning. Then the phone rang. It was Kevin. I wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or more worried. Either way, I was ready. I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation I'd had with Jared. It had been a week since he'd returned, offering his help in bringing down the corruption in the company. But something about his sudden reappearance didn't sit right with me. I'd learned too much, seen too much to just forgive and forget. He might be my brother, but that didn't mean I had to trust him. Not now, not after everything that had happened. I was in my office, the late afternoon light filtering through the blinds. The weight of the day hung heavy on my shoulders. The phone call from Jared still echoed in my mind. He wanted to help, but how much of this was genuine, and how much was just him trying to get back into the company? I had no answers, but I knew one thing: it was time for a confrontation. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. When he answered, his voice sounded as casual as ever, like he hadn't just caused a storm in my life. "Sonia," he said, "I've been thinking. I want to make things right. Let's talk." I didn't waste any time with pleasantries. "I need to know the truth, Jared. About everything. Why did you really leave the company? Why didn't you tell me about the corruption?" There was a long pause on the other end. I could almost hear him trying to figure out what to say. I didn't know it was that bad," he finally muttered, as though trying to convince himself more than me. "I had no idea. I left to find myself, Sonia. You know that. It wasn't about the company. It was about me." I clenched my fists, trying to keep the anger from boiling over. "You're telling me you had no idea what was going on, but now you want to help? Why didn't you help before, when you were still here? Why didn't you tell me the truth?" "Look, Sonia, His voice faltered, and for a moment I thought I detected real emotion. "I didn't know, okay? And I couldn't deal with it anymore. But I'm back now. I want to fix this." His words felt like a slap in the face. My brother, the one I had looked up to and relied on for so many years, was now lying to my face. I could feel the anger rising inside me, but I refused to let it show. "I don't trust you, Jared," I said, my voice cold. "And I don't need your help." There was silence on the other end, and for a moment I thought he might hang up. But then he spoke again, his tone more insistent. "You don't understand. I'm trying to make amends. We can fix this together. But you have to let me in, Sonia. You have to trust me." The words stung. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust him, to believe that this wasn't just another manipulation. But my gut told me something different. Something wasn't right. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't rely on Jared, not anymore. I couldn't let him back into my life and into the company, not until I had answers, not until I knew the whole truth. "I'll handle it, Jared," I said firmly. You've done enough." I hung up before he could respond, my mind racing. I couldn't let him back into the company, but I also couldn't ignore the fact that he might know more than he was letting on. I needed to dig deeper, and I needed to do it without him. As I sat in my office, staring out the window, I made a decision. It was time to take matters into my own hands. I couldn't keep relying on Jared, and I couldn't keep waiting for others to fix what had been broken. The corruption in the company ran deeper than I had initially thought, and I was going to expose it. I called a few of my trusted employees into my office. Sarah, the senior employee who had been with the company for years, was the first to arrive. She sat down across from me, her face filled with concern. "What's going on?" she asked. "I need your help," I said, looking at her. "We're going to find out everything, all the people involved. We need to gather evidence. We can't let this go on any longer." Sarah nodded, her expression serious. "I'm with you. Whatever it takes." The decision had been made. I couldn't rely on anyone else to take action for me. It was up to me to confront the corruption and expose the truth, no matter what it cost. But as the day went on, the weight of the risks began to settle in. I knew I was walking a dangerous path. I could lose everything: the company, my reputation, my freedom. The lawyer I'd spoken to earlier had already warned me about the consequences. He'd suggested I take a plea deal, settle things privately. But I couldn't do that. Not when so many people had already suffered. I refused to back down. I was going to do this, no matter the cost. But as I prepared to confront the board and expose the corruption, the fear began to creep in. Was I ready to risk everything for this? Was I ready to take on the powerful people who had been manipulating the system for so long? Just as I was about to gather my thoughts, the phone rang. I picked it up, not recognizing the number. Sonia? A voice on the other end said. It was a man's voice, deep and unfamiliar. Yes? I asked, my heart racing. You don't know me, he said. But I have information that could change everything. Someone close to you is about to betray you. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? You'll find out soon enough, the voice replied. Just know, you can't trust anyone. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, my mind spinning. Betrayal. Who could it be? Jared, one of my employees, my own family? I had no way of knowing. But one thing was clear. I couldn't trust anyone. Not anymore. I stood up, walked to the door, and took a deep breath. I was about to face the board and expose everything. But now, more than ever, I wasn't sure who I could rely on. The rain had been relentless all afternoon, tapping against the windows of my office, the sound oddly comforting as I sat at my desk, preparing for the meeting that would determine everything. The night before the big confrontation, and I felt the weight of the moment settle into my bones. I'd worked for this, fought for it, and now the time had come to face the board, to expose the truth, no matter the cost. The office was eerily quiet, save for the storm outside. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the papers in front of me, but my mind wasn't on the documents. Instead, I reflected on everything that had led me here. The long hours, the sleepless nights, the doubts that had plagued me every step of the way. I'd given so much, sacrificed so much, and now, finally, I had a chance to do something that mattered. But the price had been steep. The betrayal from Jared. The corrupt system I had stepped into. And now, I was staring down the barrel of a gun. Figuratively, of course. One wrong move, and it could all fall apart. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. But before I could gather my thoughts, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. An anonymous number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Sonia? A voice crackled on the other end, deep, unfamiliar. Listen closely, the voice said. If you go through with this, if you expose what you've uncovered, it will ruin you. Your career, your reputation, everything you've worked for will be destroyed. Walk away now, and this can all be forgotten. I felt the chill in my chest, a cold knot tightening. A warning, a threat. You don't know who you're dealing with, I said, keeping my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. I'm not backing down. You can't intimidate me. The line went dead. I sat there for a moment, still, trying to steady the storm of thoughts in my head. The warning wasn't enough to stop me, but it unsettled me more than I cared to admit. I wasn't just dealing with corrupt executives anymore. I was stepping into dangerous territory. The truth was out there, and it had to be exposed. I couldn't walk away. Not now. I gathered the evidence I had painstakingly collected over the past weeks. Financial reports, emails, memos, all pointing to the web of corruption that had been festering within the company for years. It was more than just embezzlement or money laundering. It was the heart of the company itself, rotting from the inside out. I wasn't the same person I had been when I first walked through those doors. The passive woman who had always put others first, who had allowed herself to be overlooked. That woman was gone, and in her place stood someone stronger, more determined. And yet, despite the fire burning inside me, there was a part of me still uncertain, still wondering if I could handle the consequences of this decision. I had to ask myself, what was I willing to lose? Was I ready to lose everything for this? For the truth? The clock on the wall ticked down, each second feeling like an eternity. Before I could think too much about it, there was a knock on my office door. Sarah, my most trusted ally, entered without waiting for an invitation. Her expression was serious, her brow furrowed with concern. "Everything ready?" she asked, her voice calm but tinged with worry. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, it's time." She took a seat across from me, her eyes scanning the papers in front of me. "You're sure about this?" she asked, her voice softening. "This isn't going to be easy." "I don't have a choice anymore," I said, my voice tight. "I can't let them get away with this." But as I spoke, I saw something in Sarah's eyes that made my heart sink. Hesitation. She hesitated, and it hit me. She was scared. This wasn't just about the company. This was about her life, too. The risks she'd be taking. The fallout she could face. "I'm with you," she said, her voice firm despite the uncertainty in her eyes. "But we need to be careful. There's no going back after tomorrow." I took a deep breath, nodding. "I know. But we can't let fear control us." There was another knock, and Michael, another trusted employee, walked in. He was usually confident, unshakable, but today he looked different. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes uncertain. "Michael," I said, meeting his gaze, "you okay?" He hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I'm not sure about this anymore, Sonia. It's getting too dangerous. What if we're in over our heads?" His words were like a slap to the face. Doubt. Doubt that wasn't there before. I'm not backing down," I said, my voice cold. "And I need you with me. If we do this, we do it together. I'm not doing this alone." Michael didn't say anything at first. The silence between us stretched on for a moment before he nodded. "All right, I'm with you. Let's do this." With that, I could feel the tension lift slightly. I had my team. We were ready. There was no turning back now. The hours seemed to stretch on forever, but eventually we all gathered in the conference room. The meeting was set for the morning, and I knew I had to prepare. I went over the evidence one last time, making sure every detail was in place, every document, every email, every report. Nothing could go wrong. But as I stood there, my mind wandered back to my childhood, to my brother, to the countless times I had tried to gain approval from my family. And now, here I was, trying to gain approval from a board that I had every intention of exposing. Was this about justice? Or was it just me still trying to prove something to everyone? No, this was about me. I wasn't going to let anyone else dictate my choices anymore. This was my fight, my battle, and I would win. The rain had slowed to a drizzle as I walked into the conference room, ready to face the board. My team stood by my side, ready to back me up. The final moment had arrived. And then, as I took a step forward, my phone buzzed again. Jared. Of course. I answered it without hesitation, feeling the knot in my stomach tighten. "Don't do this, Sonia," he said, his voice laced with desperation. "If you go through with this, it'll ruin everything. You'll never be able to fix it." "I'm not backing down," I replied, my voice firm. "This is bigger than you, Jared. Bigger than all of us." "You're making a mistake," he said, almost pleading. But it was too late. I hung up the phone, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open. I was ready for whatever came next. The boardroom was everything I feared it would be. Cold, clinical, the sharp edges of glass walls reflecting the morning light like 1,000 eyes watching, waiting. My team and I were seated at the head of the table, the tension hanging thick in the air. Today was the day I either reclaimed my future or watched it crumble to dust. There was no middle ground here. I glanced at the people around me, Sarah, Michael, and the others. Each of them had put their trust in me, and each of them knew what was at stake. The board members sat across from us, their eyes hard, their expressions unreadable. David, the CEO, opened the meeting with his usual condescending tone. "Sonia, I don't think you fully understand the complexity of the situation here. This isn't just about a few bad choices or mismanagement. The company's operations are too vast for someone with your experience to comprehend fully." His words were meant to intimidate, to belittle me. But they only made my resolve harder. I met his gaze, my voice calm but firm. "I understand more than you think, David, and I have evidence that proves your involvement in the fraud that's been going on in this company." The words hit like a thunderclap in a room full of dry timber. There was no denying it now. I wasn't just here to talk. I was here to expose them. David's smirk faded, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes. "What evidence?" he challenged, trying to regain control. I slid the documents across the table, the papers settling with a finality that made every head at the table turn. "These," I said, each word steady as I pointed at the pile. "These are the financial reports showing that you, the board, have been part of a massive money laundering scheme, and I'm prepared to take this all the way to the authorities." The silence in the room was suffocating. I could feel the weight of my decision pressing down on me, but there was no turning back now, not after everything I'd learned, not after the sacrifices I'd made. Then, as if on cue, one of my most trusted allies, Michael, shocked me with a sudden betrayal. His voice cut through the tense air, his words heavy with doubt. "Sonia, I think you're misinterpreting the evidence. These actions were taken in the best interest of the company. There's no conspiracy here, no fraud. You're reading this wrong." I stared at him, heart sinking into my stomach. "Michael, what the hell are you talking about?" He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I'm just saying, this could all blow up in your face. If we go public with this, it could destroy the company. Maybe this is all just a misunderstanding." I couldn't believe it. This wasn't just a disagreement. It was a betrayal. The person I thought would stand by me had now turned against me, defending the very people I was trying to expose. But I wouldn't let his doubt shake me. Instead, I took a deep breath and looked around the room, meeting the eyes of my team. "This is what they do," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "They play games. They twist the truth to protect their own interests, but I'm not backing down. Not now." Michael shifted uncomfortably again, his face flushed, but I could see the cracks in his resolve. The others in the room were watching him now, and I could feel the tide starting to turn. I wasn't the only one who saw through him. I stood up, moving to the front of the room with the final piece of evidence, a hidden contract, one that David had thought was safely buried. It was signed by him, implicating him in the illegal sale of company assets. I slammed it down on the table. "Care to explain this, David? This contract says otherwise. You were the one orchestrating these illegal transactions." This wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate plan. The room fell into a deep silence. The magnitude of what I was revealing began to sink in, and I could feel the weight of the truth spreading through the room. The board members were visibly shaken, their faces pale as the reality of the situation hit them. David tried to recover, his voice shaky. "This is all lies. You're making a mistake, Sonia. You're attacking the very foundation of this company." I wasn't done yet. I pulled out my final piece of ammunition, a video recording, a conversation David had with one of his associates, discussing how they had orchestrated the fraudulent activities. It was damning. It was everything. David's face turned red as the video played for everyone to see. His past actions were now laid bare, and there was nowhere for him to hide. The truth had surfaced, and it was undeniable. "This is who you're dealing with," I said, as I looked at the board members. "David is the one who put this company in jeopardy, not me." The shift in the room was palpable. The board members who had once been silent, looking to David for guidance, now began to look at him with suspicion. I could see it in their eyes. They knew. They knew they had been complicit in this all along. David tried one last attempt to salvage his position, but it was too late. The truth had been exposed, and the power had shifted. But just as I thought I had won, there was a knock on the door. A message had come through on my phone, and as I read it, my heart sank. It was from Jared. "You think you've won, Sonia, but you're wrong. I've been working behind the scenes, and now I have control of the company you thought was yours. Everything you fought for, it's mine now." I stared at the message, stunned. Jared had been playing me all along, working in the shadows to undo everything I had accomplished. As the board meeting ended in chaos and the CEO was swiftly removed from his position, I couldn't help but feel the sting of victory mixed with uncertainty. The battle wasn't over. The real war was just beginning. The evening air was thick with anticipation as I walked into the grand ballroom of the upscale hotel, the sound of chatter and clinking glasses filling the space. The lavish decorations and expensive suits stood in stark contrast to the battle I was about to face. This was supposed to be a night of celebration, but for me, it was the culmination of months of treachery, betrayal, and the fight for my future. I could feel the weight of every step as I made my way to the front of the room, my team following closely behind. We were seated at the head of the table, directly across from the remaining board members, and Jared, who now sat as the CEO of his rival company. The tension was palpable, the air so thick you could cut it with a knife. No one knew what was coming, but I could feel the storm brewing beneath the surface. Jared wasted no time. As soon as I sat down, he leaned forward, his voice dripping with disdain. "You've done enough damage, Sonia. You've ruined this company. And you've turned everything our father worked for into a battleground for your own ego." His words hit harder than I expected, but I was ready. The anger in his voice only fueled my resolve. I stood up, steadying myself as I gathered the evidence I had meticulously prepared. "I'm not the one who ruined this company, Jared. You've been siphoning funds, hiding assets, and selling off parts of this business to line your pockets. You're the one who betrayed everything this company was built on." The room fell silent. I watched as Jared's confident smirk faltered, his eyes darting nervously around the room. He wasn't used to being confronted like this, especially not by his own sister. But I didn't stop there. I pulled out the documents, the contracts, the bank statements, everything. "These are the records proving your involvement in the illegal sale of company assets. And here," I said, placing another paper on the table, "is the evidence that shows how you've been manipulating the stock market, all while pretending to play the part of the responsible CEO." Jared stood up, a red flush creeping up his neck. "This is all a lie," he spat. "You're misinterpreting the evidence. You don't understand how business works, Sonia. You're not cut out for this." I felt the anger rise in my chest, but I remained calm. "Don't try to spin this. The truth is right here in black and white. And you're not going to get away with it this time." Jared's eyes narrowed. Then, in an attempt to shift the narrative, he pulled out a personal video. It was footage from years ago, me, struggling to keep the company afloat after our father's death. My face was tired, my voice shaky, and in that moment I had been overwhelmed. "Look at this," he said, his voice cold. "This is who you were. This is who you still are. You can't even handle your own emotions, let alone run a company." I felt a rush of frustration, my heart pounding. It was a low blow, and for a moment it almost worked, but I shook my head, refusing to let him manipulate me again. "You want to pull out old footage of my weaknesses to distract everyone? That's all you've got. It's not going to work." I turned back to the board, their eyes now shifting from Jared to me. "The only reason Jared is doing this is because he couldn't get the company on his own terms. He's bitter, and he's using every trick he knows to undermine me. But what he doesn't realize is that I've fought too long to let him take this away from me." The room was buzzing now, whispers spreading as Jared's attempt to sway the crowd fell flat. But just as I thought I had the upper hand, the last person I expected stepped forward. My mother. She had been silent throughout the entire ordeal, but now her voice rang out in the room, full of accusation. "Sonia, you're destroying our family. You've torn us apart over something that doesn't even matter. You're doing this for your own selfish reasons, and you're ruining everything your father built." Her words cut deep. For a moment, I felt my legs weaken. The last person I thought would turn against me had done so with such conviction. My mother, the woman who had always stood by me, was now defending Jared. The weight of it was almost too much to bear. I stood frozen for a second, trying to process her betrayal. But then, something clicked inside me. I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me. I wasn't going to back down because of her fear. "This isn't about me, Mom," I said, my voice steady despite the hurt. "This is about doing what's right. This is about making sure our family's legacy isn't defined by greed and corruption." My father, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "Sonia, I've watched you fight for this company. But sometimes you have to know when to walk away. You're going to destroy us all if you keep pushing this. Let Jared have it. It's time to let go." His words hit me harder than anything else. My father, the one person who had always been my rock, was telling me to quit. I felt the weight of his disappointment, but it wasn't enough to make me second-guess myself. "I can't," I said, the words coming out quietly at first. "I've worked too hard for this. I'm not going to walk away. I'll fight until the very end, no matter what it costs." I knew the decision I was making was going to change everything. The stakes had never been higher, and the choice I was about to make was irreversible. But I couldn't back down. Not now. As I stood there, preparing myself for the final push, the door to the room swung open. A former employee, someone I hadn't seen in years, stepped in, holding a file in his hand. The room fell silent again. "This is it," he said, walking toward me. "This is the final piece of evidence you need to take Jared down for good." I could feel the collective breath of the room hold as I took the file from his hand. This was the moment, the final piece to end it all. The courtroom was cold and silent, the tension thick in the air. The final chapter of this war, the battle for control of the company, was about to reach its conclusion. Spectators lined the walls, the officials and high-ranking employees of the company waiting anxiously to see how this would end. The long hours of testimony had led us here, and now, with everything on the line, it was time to face Jared one last time. I took my seat, the weight of the moment heavy on my shoulders. Across from me sat Jared, looking tense and uncharacteristically quiet. He had always been so confident, so sure of his place. But today, he was rattled. He knew this was it. The endgame. The final verdict would change everything for both of us. The judge called the room to order, and it was time. Jared began his final argument, his words laced with bitterness and an attempt to justify his actions. But I wasn't listening to his lies anymore. I had the truth on my side. And I was going to make sure everyone in this room knew it. I rose from my seat and, with steady hands, presented the final piece of evidence. A recording, one that had been made years ago, where Jared was caught red-handed, admitting his plan to destroy the company and ruin my life. The courtroom was silent as the words played over the speakers, Jared's voice unmistakable as he detailed how he had orchestrated the entire fall of our father's company for his own benefit. The reaction was instantaneous. Gasps filled the room. Jared's face drained of color, and he stammered, trying to salvage what was left of his credibility. But it was too late. The damage had been done. I had just exposed him for what he truly was. As I sat back down, the shift in power was palpable. Jared was no longer in control. I was, but my victory wasn't yet complete. I could feel his eyes on me, the hatred simmering just beneath the surface. He wasn't done fighting, not by a long shot. With the evidence on my side, I stood up to deliver my final plea. This wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about everything that had been broken between us. I addressed the judge and the entire courtroom, but my words were meant for one person, my family. Family loyalty has always been my guiding principle, I said, my voice steady, despite the emotions bubbling inside me. I have sacrificed so much for this company, for this family. I've fought for its survival, for our legacy. But Jared, I turned to face him, you've turned that loyalty into a weapon. You've betrayed everything our father built. I could see the shock in the room, the disbelief that this was happening, but I was past caring about their opinions. My family, the people I loved, had pushed me to this point, and now it was my turn to take control. I stand here not just as a businesswoman, I continued, my voice cracking, but as a daughter who watched her family fall apart because of greed and betrayal. This company can still be saved, but it has to be done right. It can't be a monument to lies and corruption. I paused, letting my words hang in the air. The silence that followed was deafening. But I wasn't done. I couldn't be. Not yet. The judge nodded solemnly, and for a moment I thought it was over. But Jared wasn't finished. He made one last attempt to sway the verdict. As I watched him lean forward, I knew what he was about to do. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. His eyes darted to the judge, his voice low but full of desperation. "I can make this all go away," he said. "Name your price. You can have anything you want. Just make this stop." The room froze. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jared had just offered the judge a bribe, in front of all of us. My stomach turned. This was the last straw. Without thinking, I stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. "Your Honor," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "Jared has just offered you a bribe to sway this decision. I have to expose him now before he does any more damage." The courtroom was in chaos. People were whispering, some shocked, others disgusted. But I knew what I had to do. There was no turning back now. I had to stand for what was right, no matter what it cost me. The judge's face was unreadable as he took a moment to process this new information. I could see Jared squirming in his seat, his once confident demeanor completely shattered. The room was alive with energy, everyone waiting for the final word. Then, the judge spoke. His voice was calm but firm. This court has heard enough. Sonia, you will be granted full control of the company, and Jared, you will be held responsible for your actions. You will pay reparations, and any further legal action must be handled privately. The verdict was in. The battle was over, but I couldn't bring myself to feel the triumph I had expected. There was no victory dance, no celebration. The decision was bittersweet. I had won, yes, but the cost of this victory, my relationship with my brother, the broken family ties, was too great to ignore. As I stood there, processing everything, I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. I had done what I needed to do, but I had lost something in the process. The room began to empty as the court session came to a close. I stood there, watching Jared leave with his head hung low. It was done, but it wasn't over. Back in my office, I stared out the window, the weight of everything settling in. The company was now mine. But what would I do with it? What would I do with my life now that the battle was over? Just as I was about to sit down, a notification popped up on my screen. A new message. I opened it, and the name made my heart race. It was from someone I hadn't heard from in years. An old investor with ties to my family. I took a deep breath. I had won this battle, but my war was far from over. This was just the beginning. The future was uncertain, but now I could shape it on my own terms.